everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my session, and welcome to Summer Institute. Here we are virtual again. I want to thank you for sticking through the day and to the end of the day to hear me speak today. And I'm sure a lot of you know who I am. My name is Wendy Sweeney. I am the manager for Panda, and I am also a licensed psychologist. And for those of you who are new to Adult Ed, welcome. Just to let you know about Panda and our services, we provide disability support services for adult basic ed throughout the state of Minnesota. And we also provide information and help with any students that are having learning challenges, suspected of having a disability or not, and also mental health support. So our website is a fabulous resource that is there for you. And I will be going to the website towards the end to show some mental health resources, but please join me at my vendor fair tomorrow afternoon at noon. If you want to learn more about our services, I'll delve a little bit into our website and then to have an opportunity to ask any questions that you have. So here are some of the things that we will be talking about and you will be learning before the end of our session. We only have 45 minutes, so I'll try not to talk too fast, but I usually tend to, so I'll try not to be too speedy about it. But I will be briefly talking about how teaching and learning during COVID has impacted mental health. And then I will be talking about strategies on how to reduce stress, which we all have been facing a lot in the last year and a half. Then I will be talking about some methods to help you transition back to school this fall. For those of you who are just returning for the fall, I would imagine most of you. And then I will also be talking about ways to set boundaries with your students and also in your lives, your personal lives, talk about self-care strategies, and then give you some good mental health resources. So I want to start, first of all, to talk about juggling. You have all had to juggle so much in the last year and a half, and here we are starting the fall. I'm not sure. I've been hearing from other programs, many programs are doing various instructional models, whether it's in person or distance learning or a combination of both. And first of all, I really want to just say thank you for all you do. I'm just so impressed with how well teachers had to navigate so quickly when back in February, March of 2020, when the pandemic began and we had lockdown. And of course, you had to learn all about instructing students online, something that I think the majority of teachers were not trained to do or very minimally trained. So thank you for all you've done. Thank you for persisting. I really admire your resilience in this way. I'm going to just kind of review some of this juggling, which has, caused a lot of pressure in our lives in the last year and a half. And I like to use the picture here with the bubbling pot is just a visual picture of what it's like when stress is just ongoing. And so if you think of your pot on the stove as, simmering, and then something happens and the heat goes up to high and we start bubbling over. First of all, we've all had to face all the changes, both in the schools and going back and forth in certain instructional models, along with all of the world changes, which have been immense. We have never been through this before, first with the pandemic hitting us, then with some racial injustice that started with unfortunate George Floyd's passing, and a lot of political unrest as well. And then begin working from home, back in 2020, something that there were some silver linings, definitely, but also having to, where do you draw that boundary between your work and your home life and the isolation that occurs, and trying to juggle your many roles. I'm assuming a lot of you have children at home, and them learning virtually as well. It's a lot of juggling going on for sure. And then doing the teaching online, which I know there were, especially initially, a lot of connection issues, figuring out how to engage students virtually, figuring out how to instruct students to use equipment if they had it. And then this going back and forth of, like I said, all those changes of the different teaching models, I think has been quite difficult. And lastly, our students, obviously having a lot of challenges in regard to their own use of having access to any technology, for instance, having to juggle work and their own children, having to try to figure out if they have internet connection, how to get online. A lot of teacher stories that I heard that it was very, very challenging to help the students, and they're not always prioritizing learning during these, increasingly stressful times in their lives. Along with, we know that our student population does have a lot of barriers to begin with, whether it's employment or finances or support in their life. So a lot of this being juggled. And even though we've had to juggle, we haven't really had a choice in all this juggling. It's really, our brains actually don't function well when we are not focusing on one thing at a time. And so as a result, when you are juggling and your attention is then split, it can be incredibly exhausting. She thought she found true love. Just a reminder, everybody, to mute yourselves. I'm hearing some background noise going on. And let's talk about COVID, fatigue and burnout. This is really a lot of what I'm experiencing, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing. I heard the term abnormal is the new normal. Just when we thought we were getting back to some semblance of normalcy, we end up having to take a step back to the progress we had made because of this Delta variant that is increasing cases and increasing mandates to use masks. And it's very challenging when you are given some freedom and the limitations many of us have been abiding by, and then it's taken back. So it's very, very challenging. And these changes that keep occurring with the COVID pandemic, change is hard anyway, but this ongoing change and new information and getting flooded with information is very, very hard. We all function so much better when we know what to expect and we have some routines in our lives, and we really haven't had either of those. We've just had a lot of uncertainty in our lives. And so, of course, as a result, people are very overwhelmed, fatigued, and stressed out. And as a result, because of this tiring that we are having, there's been all kinds of reactions that I am observing of people just acting out. They don't know where to put this energy. So you're hearing about like increases of road rage and people getting angry on flights and getting kicked off flights and all these things that are building in our lives. And so, we do, your feelings are valid. And I will disclose, I have been much more impatient in my life. And I know it's because of this ongoing change that keeps happening. And I always say our feelings are valid as long as they're expressed in a healthy manner. And what happens is when you stuff and stuff and stuff your feelings, it comes out sideways. And that's where, for example, the road rage, or, snapping at somebody who really didn't cause a problem. So I want to take a moment to for you all to have an opportunity to share in the chat box, if you're comfortable, one feeling that you have regarding the COVID pandemic and the challenges from the past year and a half. So please take a moment to share a feeling in the chat box, a healthy feeling.
Wendy, we're seeing words such as despair, overwhelmed, frustration, weariness, resilience, chaotic, frustrating, fatigue, the constant shaming everywhere, unsettled, fear, exhaustion, frustrated by lack of unity, no balance, disappointed, unknown, divisiveness, apathy.
Wow, what a great sampling of feelings. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Penny. And all of those, I can relate to all of them. And you are right. This is just such a confusing time in our lives, and it's very hard to sort out information. And there is that divisiveness that's very unsettling. So let's talk about stress. We have, as you very well clearly shared there, all of those feelings you're having, many of them anyway, do cause stress. And we have experienced both intense stress, such as when the pandemic began, and then the ongoing changes that resulted, and thinking it was only going to last a couple of months to now it's a year and a half. Now it's obviously prolonged stress. And this is not good for our physical or our mental health. I really like this picture that shows you how stress impacts our bodies and our brain. And so, stress can be positive when it's short term and gets resolution. For instance, studying for a test or taking a test or preparing for a workshop, that you can feel some stress, which increases your focus. But this ongoing prolonged stress, physically, headaches can happen. This is very common, or muscle aches from tensing your body in your neck, stomach aches. Also, this ongoing prolonged stress increases blood pressure and chances for heart disease and stroke. And it can impact your sleep, whether you're sleeping more or you're having trouble getting to sleep because your mind is racing and you're upset. And then mentally, emotions are so much higher. People don't know where to put their emotions, like I was talking about with feelings. And when your emotions are high, your rational brain's kind of snoozing. And so, those uncertainties increase emotion. And of course, feeling overwhelmed, which I talked about, the irritability as a result when it comes out sideways, anxiety and depression are all can be impacted by that prolonged stress. And then we have, let's talk about some ways to alleviate all this stress, starting with COVID, fatigue, and burnout. The biggest thing, and I say this at many of my workshops, is to focus on what you can control. Sounds so simple, but it is the best and easiest thing you can be doing, is putting your energy in those things you can control, because all these uncertainties we have no control over for the most part. And so beginning with keeping things in perspective. Um, if you think about back in last February, March of 2020, how we had a lockdown, how we couldn't leave our homes, we couldn't get haircuts, we couldn't go to the restaurant, we couldn't see our family. And that was really scary and a huge sacrifice. And now, moving to the present day, even though we have this variant, we have a vaccine. We have um, something that's keeping us safer. We have made progress. Scientists have learned more and more about it. Of course, it's evolving, but there has been progress made, and that will continue. The second thing is focusing on the present. None of us has a crystal ball. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. We don't know what the future of the virus is going to be. So the best thing we can do, and I know this is hard, but to try as best as you can to focus on each and every day, one day at a time. Third thing, there is so much information out there. I think it's incredibly confusing. And I am somebody who is always seeking the credible scientific information. And I really want to encourage you to do that. And sometimes you have to go looking for it, but making sure you are getting a balanced view of what's out there. I think in our world of social media and a billion bazillion channels, you can listen to whoever you think thinks like you. But that's not always the wisest thing to do, because it's always best to get both points of view or several points of view. But in case of the virus, the science and the epidemiologists, the experts are the best source of information, and giving them some grace that because the virus continues to mutate, the information is constantly changing along with that. And that's why I think it's so confusing. Please continue using safety measures so that we prevent losing the progress we've made so far. So I know it's hard, but going back to those masks, social distancing if you have to, especially in crowded areas. And of course, this requires so much persistence and patience and hope. And we all have to have hope that this is eventually going to improve to the point where we have some normalcy in our lives. So let's talk about some other tools to generally reduce stress. And these are some tips you may be aware of and may not. And they are good for both you personally and also for your students. So I'm going to kind of be talking about both a little bit here. One of the first things that I would really highly recommend, because I'm talking about how emotional people have become, is to start your day. And you're starting in the fall, so this is a perfect time to start some new routines. Start your day with a calming activity. Whether it's some music, a short little yoga exercise or meditation, whatever you're comfortable with. You can also do this for yourself as you're getting up in the morning. Also, just being mindful of your thoughts. Our thoughts are constantly, we have this constant conversation going on in our brains. Sometimes it's hard to turn it off, but oftentimes it's unconscious and you're not even aware of what you're thinking. Your thoughts might be like, for instance, if you're thinking, this is never going to end, being consciously aware of that. Sometimes our thoughts are not truthful, and trying to reframe them in a way that is more truthful, such as, I'm going to do the best I can to get through this day. So that's what I mean by reframing. And these are things you can also teach your students. We just did a little exercise on expression of feelings and frustrations. And so it's something that I will be talking about a little bit later, but also in regard to your students. This could be something that you you would do at the beginning of your day is just share one feeling you're having today, giving them that opportunity to express a feeling and briefly talk about it. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, or you could make it a writing activity where they are expressing what they've been through in the past year and a half and their feelings about where we're going. Already talked about focusing on what you can control, but this is an activity you could do in your classroom. I'm such a strong believer in the written visuals of just putting up a sheet of paper what you can control and what you cannot control, and distinguishing that, and emphasizing then, recognizing that so many of the things we worry about are out of our control. And then lastly, just thinking, our brains are really drawn towards negatives. I've been very interested in the brain. I've done a lot of research about the brain, and our brains are attracted to negativity. And the reason for that is to protect ourselves. It's a survival instinct. So like, for instance, when you're, stuck on the freeway because of an accident, and you finally get up to the accident, everybody takes off. It's fun, so it's just as everybody's looking, do I know that person? Is everybody okay? They slow down to look. So we're driven towards that negativity, which is why the media knows it, and the media tends to be more negative. But there's positive things happening around us every single day. And so trying to make an effort to train yourself to focus on some of those positives that are happening every day is, you do really have to train your brain to do that, because we sometimes discount it. So something you can do with your students is in maybe the beginning of your day when they express a feeling, and tell me one good thing that's happened today, or one silver lining. So let's take a moment. I've given you some ideas for reducing stress for yourself and your students. So I want you to share in the chat box a strategy you'll use to reduce stress for yourself, and one strategy you will use to help your students, whether you use the ones that I suggested, or if you want to share something else that you have used. We'll take a minute for you to share.
Wendy, some of the things that we're seeing is a daily gratitude list, yoga, breathing, journaling, exercise, asking students to share their feelings, kickboxing, prayer, deep breathing, exercise, walking outside, mindful thoughts, music, focusing on what I can control, something called blob trees, using blob trees for students to show emotions and spark discussion. Again, music, working out, having class outdoors, brain breaks, calming music, walking a dog, audiobooks, a survey with students every week, asking for a positive from the week, using student routines in class, house projects, watching comedic movies.
Great. Okay. Thank you for sharing all of those. I'm sure we could listen to more, but I'm happy to hear that you are picking up some tips and also sharing some that you have used in the past. So now what? Now it's time to be transitioning back to teaching this fall, whether your program is going to be doing distance learning or a hybrid or all in person. And I know at the adult academic program in Crystal, that has changed as time has gone on. And so whether you are in person or if you are online, now at the beginning of the year is a great time to reconnect with students and staff. Relationships are so important in this time in our lives. Very, very important. I really want to emphasize that. And so getting to know your students, even if you have had them before and they're returning, or if they're brand new students, really people value when you get to know them personally. And so I would encourage you to have some activities where they can get to know each other and you get to know them. For instance, just having a form they complete or a conversation you have where you can have them share information about how their summer was and how they have been doing with COVID and or about their families. And then secondly, just community building activities. I'm sure many of you do this in the fall anyway, but that community building so that the students get to know each other as well as you getting to know them. And like, for instance, an example of one that I love that I teach in my Universal Design for Learning training is called the peer interview. And it's just simply pairing two students off to interview each other to get information about each other, which you could do online by putting them all in breakout groups and then coming back as a group. And then the students introduce each other to the full group. So it's a way for them to connect and get to know the students get to know each other. You might, I'm sure, learn things about them as well. So that's one point that I want to emphasize. Also, research shows that to create a safe environment, which I think we all need, is that feeling of safety, requires high structure and high warmth. And so this is an example of the high warmth, welcoming students as best you can and making them feel comfortable. And now we're going to talk about setting some boundaries, which really does help with that high structure. First is just keeping a daily routine. We are so lacking in routine in our lives, and it's so needed. And students need it as well. It helps build trust and predictability and safety. They can be, routines are comforting and they reduce chaos. So some examples of setting that daily routine. Now it's the beginning of the year, perfect time to do it. Starting and stopping class at the same time. I know in adulthood, particularly in person, and I know sometimes even online, that students kind of wander in, for the first 20 minutes to 30 minutes, which can be very disruptive. And so don't stop class when people come in, just keep it going to get them in the habit of starting and stopping. It does help them, and it's also a life skill. If they were going to work and showing up late every day of work, they probably wouldn't stay in the job. So starting and stopping at the same time, an easy routine to keep, and just keeping your subjects in the same daily order so they have that predictability. It's another example. Writing the schedule on the board, I think, can be very helpful. Many students are visual learners. And then setting those clear expectations in class rules. And so often I've gotten some pushback from teachers who say, but they're adults, they know the rules. Don't assume that they know the rules. A lot of times they do not. And beginning of the year is a perfect time to set those class rules about what will and will not be tolerated in the class, and what are they doing about the cell phone rules? What about starting and stopping on time? What about being absent? Showing some respect, raising your hand, all those things. But I really want to encourage you to involve your students in setting those rules as an activity, because they'll have much more buy-in if you do that. So having those clear daily routines, clear expectations and class rules can be very, very helpful for yourself, but especially for the students. So now let's talk about setting boundaries in your own personal life. how to seek that work-life balance, which can be so challenging, particularly if you're still working at home. But the biggest one that I like to emphasize is saying no. I think so many of us have a knee-jerk yes to any obligations that are put on our plate, whether it's joining a new committee or going to some workshops or adding another responsibility to your job, or getting together with friends, whatever it might be. Saying no is very difficult, and yet that's when you can get spread very, very thin. And so, one of the things I recommend, rather, because it's hard to say no for one thing, and then people seem to think you have to give a reason why, is just to use some time buying phrases. So rather than saying no or yes, you use some time buying phrases to give you the chance to really think about if you want to do this, if it's something you can add to your already spread thin lives. So, time buying phrases, for instance, would be let me get back to you on that. I need to check my schedule and I will let you know. So that you can then respond and say yes or no. And you don't have to give explanations to people. You don't have to. So it can be very general when you respond. If you decide, no, I really don't want to do it, to just say, you know what, I've just got too much going on right now. I don't have the time to make it to this gathering or to join this committee. Second thing is asking others for help, which I think you're all in the helping profession. And when you're in the helping profession, it's very hard to ask others for help because you're not used to it. I always want to point this out, is asking for that help, which can be challenging, is to your benefit. And so, like, for instance, in your personal life, asking your spouse or your children to help with chores around the house. And in your workplace, asking an EA, delegating some duties to your EA. Or if you're in person, you can ask students to help you with cleanup, for instance, or setting up for the day. But asking for that help is so important. Next one is do not work for free. I know this is especially difficult at the beginning of a year when you're preparing for your year, but really trying to keep some limits and boundaries around how much time you put into your job as a way of setting boundaries in your life, so that you are really clear on if you're going to or have to put some extra time in, please put some limits around it. And another one I like to recommend is to set a designated time for returning students' calls or emails or texts. I don't think it's healthy to be available 24/7. And so this can be something you can talk about when you're setting your rules and routines up for the year by saying, you can leave me a call or a text or email 24/7, but be aware I do not answer them except between 4 and 5 or whatever it might be. So think about that as a way of setting some boundaries. And then obviously taking some time to rejuvenate after a long day of teaching. I know how much energy it takes to teach your students, to make sure you do something every day to refresh your energy. All right, so we're going to do another activity here. I'd like you to please share again in the chat box. You've been doing a fabulous job of sharing. Name one way you will set boundaries with your students, and name one way you will set boundaries in your life. And again, you can use any of the examples that I just shared with you or any others that you may have used that are helpful. So take a minute for that.
Wendy, our responses that are coming in are saying, I'll think about it, saying no, giving wait time, don't work for free, not responding to messages after 5 p.m., and then being explicit with students about those hours. Shutting the phone on off mode after 8 p.m. That's a good piece of advice. Again, setting a specific time for returning calls. That seems to be a popular idea that is popping up here a lot.
Right.
As someone said, it's easier to set boundaries with students than with family, so that also has to apply to family. Keeping classroom routines, keeping office hours, and having those specific rules. Don't work for free is coming up multiple times.
Great. Great.
Yep.
Okay.
Office hours seems very popular.
Okay, great. Thank you, Penny, and thank you everyone for sharing. I'm glad that you're picking up some tips here, and I think this is just perfect time to be setting those boundaries at the beginning of the year. It's much harder to do it later, as the year goes on. So lastly, we're going to talk about some self-care. This is, you hear this term all the time, self-care, self-care. I like this visual. I stole it from adult academic program. They used it in a staff meeting, but I liked seeing the different types of self-care that you can do, what might work for you. So I'm going to briefly touch on each of these. I think the physical self-care, I think everybody's very knowledgeable about how to take care of yourself physically. It's just kind of been drilled into us. And so whether that's, some kind of exercise, yoga or meditation, getting good sleep there's been a lot of research on if you do not get average amount of 6 to 8 hours, it can really impact you physically and mentally. So getting in that routine of sleep, and then obviously some moderation and food and alcoholic drink, especially. I know, what do they say, COVID-19? I think that's definitely been a struggle for me, but just everything in moderation is always important. Socially, connecting to family, friends, and coworkers. We talked about connecting with students, but connecting with the people we love and care about that we see throughout the year is also important. And so reaching out and making a point of connecting when you can, whether that's calls or texts or gatherings. Secondly, finding a vent buddy. So I talk, it's important to find somebody in your life you can vent to. And when I say venting, because we all need to vent with all these emotions I'm talking about, I think it's important we need to vent, but we need to vent with somebody that we feel safe with, somebody we really can trust to just listen and not try to fix, but allow us to vent, and then you can reciprocate it in return. And if you are not comfortable venting to somebody in your life, I'm a huge supporter of journaling. And so any kind of journaling, whether you can just vent it out. One thing I always recommend to my clients is to do a worry time. And that's just 10 minutes right before bed, because a lot of times that's when we lay down and have quiet is when our mind starts racing. And so 10 minutes before bed, you have worry time, and you just write out what has been on your mind, venting whatever it might be, time it, only 10 minutes, and then go to bed. And it can do some wonders. So vent buddy or 10-minute worry, or both. Another way of self-care, I really believe, is setting some goals. It gives us something to look forward to, whether that's learning a new hobby or going on a vacation, something to look forward to. Setting those goals is a way of self-care. Spiritually, resilience. I know, of course, all of you have been resilient in the last year and a half, and many students have as well. But just kind of reminding that, kind of continue to build on that resilience is there's all these uncertainties that we're dealing with. One way that I really get inspired is by just looking at YouTube videos of people that have been through situations that have been much more difficult. For instance, Louis Zamperini, who fought in World War II and had to go through tremendous amounts of pain. There's a movie about it called Unbroken, but you can find short little snippets about him online. Also, Malala, the young lady who was shot in Pakistan, got the Nobel Peace Prize. They're little movie clips that really can be inspiring about how to push through really, really horrible times. Reaching out and helping others. I really think this is a way to feel good about yourself, and it helps them in return. So I know you're in the helping profession already. You're already helping a lot of students, but when you see somebody who needs a little extra something, whether it's in welcoming a new neighbor or dropping off things at Goodwill or working at a food shelf, all those things can really also make you feel good, and is a strategy for self-care. I know you all do this already, compassion and kindness, giving each other grace. This has been such a rough year and a half. It's been hard for everyone, obviously. And then connecting with your spiritual community if this is important to you. And lastly, emotional self-care. Deep breathing. The keynote talked about the two, I think it was breathe in twice and then breathe out. So there's all kinds of breathing strategies out there, but that deep breathing, it really can calm you emotionally and physically. And learning, it doesn't matter which one you use, but just learning a deep breathing technique that you will remember. The one that I always recommend is called 624, and all it is breathing in for a count of 6 seconds, hold for a count of 2 seconds, and breathe out for a count of 4 seconds. And so let's all try that let's all try it once. Everybody breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hold for 1, 2, breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. The key to this is to do it at least 5 times. And it really does send that message when you're in fight or flight, which is our survival instincts, where we're just tensing up. It sends a message to your brain to calm down.
Wendy, this is Penny. I just wanted to tell you we're down to about a minute. We're at 3:44 right now.
Okay, I will speed it up here. Another one is if you're emotional, short-tempered, a way to calm your body when you're emotional, your rational brain's taking a nap, is to count to 10 and go for a walk, or do both to give your body a chance to calm down. And then trying the calming room. I don't have time to go to that link with just a few minutes left here, but Gail, I think you're going to put the link in the chat box. This is through Osseo area schools, and it has all kinds of both visual and auditory and deep breathing exercises that you can use as a resource if you don't already have something like that. Laughing often, somebody used that as stress relief. I think that's always good for the soul. And then seeking that mental health therapy if needed. And so I really, of course, I'm a therapist, so asking for help is a strength. It really is. It's not a weakness. Because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not real. Like if you had a broken arm, obviously you would go to a doctor. Please do not hesitate to reach out for mental health care. First, there's many methods, many ways you can go about reaching out for that care. There's obviously therapy. I'm a big proponent of that. I get therapy myself. It's a healthy way to talk to somebody objective when you're going through hard times. 24/7 hotlines. We have a lot of those. I'm going to show you where those are if we have a second here. Self-help books. There's cell phone apps that have deep breathing and stress relievers and other kinds of resources. So I just want to quickly take you into Panda's website. And you can see I'm taking you directly to the mental health category, and then you click on resources. In the beginning, I have information about COVID, but the second paragraph down, I really want to encourage you to print up this form. If you click on the here word, it will download a, um, a mental health resource sheet that you can print up and share with your students or family or whoever might need it. Um, and this is got all kinds of free crisis lines. It's got a mental health crisis response. I don't think a lot of people are aware that if somebody is contemplating suicide, a student or a friend or relative, every county has a crisis response team who will come out to your home or school or work to do a safety check and evaluation. And you just need to click on this link to find the number for your county crisis team. So jot that down if you would and have a chance. I've got some free cell phone apps, a lot of teletherapy sites, although most mental health clinics are still offering virtual therapy sessions, and then many sliding fee clinics in the metro and greater Minnesota, along with other resources, websites, and books. So that's there for you if you would like to do that. And there's all kinds of more resources on this page if you need additional resources, but you can always reach out to me at Panda. So I don't know that we have a time for you to share how you will take care of yourself, but I would encourage you to write down one way that you will take care of yourself, whether it's an idea I gave or one that you regularly do. And I know we're out of time, so I'm going to just say thank you so much for sharing. Please stay healthy and safe. Be kind and patient with yourself. And Gail's launching a poll. I would appreciate you rating. Your evaluation is important to me. And if you have any other questions or concerns, please come to the vendor fair.